It's Penelope, and I'm in London, and I'm sharing knowledge with you on complex PTSD and overcoming our childhood wounding and trauma. And currently, I think a lot more of us are dipping into the reality through the lockdown period and the possible loss of relationships and jobs and a lot of fear that's going around. We're sort of stuck in a place at the moment where many of us have been on our own and we've had time to reflect on our earlier lives as we've, the way we were brought up and maybe mistreated, and things have come to light that maybe we didn't have time to think of before because of the nature of life and the fact that we're all in dissociation due to the fact that we all have to run around. So whilst it's been a very difficult time, it's also been a time for some people in awareness that we've been able to look at our shadow. And that would have been very much the work of Carl Gustav Jung, who you can check out if you don't know who he is. Freud was a mentor to Carl Gustav Jung in his earlier years, and they had a falling out, and Jung went on to create some beautiful work on the archetypes and the collective unconscious. I'm going to go to the next slide here and keep explaining. Through looking at our shadow, we then have to look, which Carl Jung would have suggested, we have to look at the early stuff that's really being compounded or not looked at and not really dealt with, because what happens is the early stuff then gets projected out in our adult lives towards our relationships. So the unhealed childhood stuff that happened via parents or at school, or even through patriarchy itself and social structure and culture, means that a lot of us are in trauma and have PTSD or complex PTSD. For some of us, it's very obvious. I know myself, I went through a very extreme tough time as a child, the whole of my childhood until I left home at 14 and a half. For many of us, hopefully I would say that most of us have had some decency, but there are just as many people that have been through sexual abuse and also violence and verbal abuse growing up. And a lot of this abuse is to do through unconsciousness of parents and society in general. And we're at a point now where we have to really begin to heal this so that we can step into a better world and help the children that are currently going to need us, like us adults that have been through the trauma, need to clean up so that we're able to be of assistance to the younger generation coming through. I'm going to talk about Pete Walker's book here. You can see 13 steps for managing flashbacks. I'm going to run through this and then explain that we have fight, flight, freeze, fawn. There are 4 types of reactions to our early trauma. The fight is where we're in fight mode, and the flight is where we want to run and flee, and freeze is where we get very dissociated and maybe just cut ourselves off from society and people by doing things that are not good for us. We could be overeating, drinking too much, or also, even using Facebook and stuff like that. We have to monitor ourselves. We have to adult ourselves and monitor how we disassociate and begin to evolve that as well. And then fawn is where we go into the codependency, and we are being codependent and overly nice to people, or putting up with stuff that we really know deep down that we shouldn't be, tolerating. So understanding how to react to our flashbacks and early triggers and imprints and memories is one way to begin to unravel the problems that we have. So what you would do is, if you know you're in a flashback, and if you don't understand what that is, I'll show you the book that you can get to dig deeper. But you say to yourself, number 1, I am having a flashback. Number 2, you remind yourself that I feel afraid, but I'm no longer in danger. And that's, of course, if you're not in danger. We have to be obvious and look after ourselves. And number 3 is own your right and need to have boundaries. And this means that, we look at our codependency as well, and we start looking at each other's boundaries in relationship. Number 4, speak reassuringly to your own inner child. Number 5, deconstruct eternity thinking. So that means that when you go into a flashback, you realize that, and if you've had them before and you've had panic attacks, you do come out of them, they don't last, and they are moments in time that can feel very frightening when they happen. So you deconstruct the eternity thinking that it's not going to go away. You know, when we've in childhood, we don't know when things are going to stop, but we understand the concept of time as adults. Number 6, remind yourself that you are in an adult body with allies, skills, and resources to protect you that you never had as a child. You know, feeling small and little is a sure sign of a flashback. So if you pick up on that and you feel like you're really small, or you feel like you're little, and you know you don't feel you're worthy, that you're or valuable, you're stepping into that childhood, going back into feeling that childhood thing, and you're not a child anymore. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. It just means that the beauty is, as an adult, we can begin to reparent ourselves and be gentle, and with our inner critic as well, how it speaks to us, we begin to banish the inner critic. Number 7, ease back into your body. Fear launches us into heady worrying or numbing and spacing out. Now, at this point, number 7, I'm going to give you a tip. If you find yourself freaking out, or you know you can't get to sleep or something like that, I have been listening to some work of the Silver Method, which is a brilliant tips in a book that I've been reading, which I won't bring up that book now, but I'm going to give you a tip. So what you can do is you could, you know, count back from 20 to 1 or 10 to 1, like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that brings you back into your body somewhat. And if you're struggling with sleep at night as well, you know, it's bringing you into what's called the alpha state. So it's slowing down the brain and it's bringing you back into yourself. So you can always try counting backwards as a simple tool. That's one thing you can do. There are many different tools. Number 8, resist the inner critics drasticizing and catastrophizing. So the inner critic is the superego. It's the voice of the parent. Not, you know, it can be all patriarchy or whatever we want to call it. It's that voice that scares the living daylights out of us and makes us feel like we're nothing and we're worthless and we're not good enough. So we have to knock the inner critic out of the way. And we can do that ourselves. We can adult ourselves to stop that voice running the show. Number 9 is we have to allow ourselves to grieve. It's really important, and not shame ourselves for feeling that we want to grieve or cry or, you know, whinge or moan a bit. We need to find the right people that we can do that with, that are able to hold space for us. And we can hold space for our friends as well. It doesn't have to be all one-sided. Number 10, cultivate safe relationships and seek support. So this is really important as well, that the relationships of safety is really important. Feeling safe within who you communicate with, feeling safe in relationships, feeling safe that you can be yourself, that you're not going to be abandoned if if you're not going along with how your friends think you should. You know, the right people will be there for you when you need them. Number 11 is learn to identify the types of triggers that lead to flashbacks. So it could be going back to a particular area. It could be speaking to a particular person. It could be a particular color. It could be certain things that are triggering you. It could be smell of a particular type of food. So we can begin to organize our lives to, you know, stop replicating the flashbacks, of these trigger items, right? If something triggers you in your home, get rid of it. You know, it's just do what needs to be done in order to start living life fruitfully and beautifully. Number 12, figure out what you're flashing back to, which is the same sort of thing. You can make a list, you know, what are you flashing back to in your mind? Sometimes it's an emotion, it's a feeling. It's not always, we're not able always to pinpoint it, but this is the work, the inner work. And number 13, be patient with a slow recovery process. This is Pete Walker, MA, Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. And the next slide is, this is the book. You can get it on Amazon. I highly recommend it to really begin to deal with your trauma. And even if you don't think you've got trauma, what some people do is they hear, you know, I know when I've told people my story, they say, oh, but you know, I didn't have it as bad as you. Well, a child is a child. So, you know, give yourself credit. If you've had a hard time, you've had a hard time. And you're entitled to the grieving process and being heard as well. It's not a competition. This who's got complex PTSD or who hasn't. All children are vulnerable, and if there's been mistreatment, then it's been tough, and we're entitled to work on that and heal it. And this is something by Alice Miller, which was very touching when I read it. So I copied it onto a Word document and pasted here. We were compelled to gratify our parents' unconscious needs at the cost of our own self-realization. We need to experience the rebellion and the mourning aroused by the fact that our parents were not available to fulfill our primary needs. Now, if your parents were not there to fulfill your primary needs, you need to take that and acknowledge it so that you can begin to do your inner parenting work, so that you can begin to give yourself the life that you deserve. And again, this is digging and delving deep. There are lots of books out there, but that's from Alice Miller. And then this is really important we understand this, that avoiding your triggers isn't healing. Healing happens when you're triggered and you're able to move through the pain, the pattern, and the story and walk your way to a different ending. So the ending doesn't particularly mean that we're fully healed and we're skipping through flowers in a field. But what it does mean is understanding that we have good days and bad days. People who've not been through abuse have good days and bad days. But when people have had abandonment very early on, you know, it's not as cut and dried as just being okay. You know, we're like the weather, we change, and like the moon, it waxes, wanes, and changes, and you know, we're human, so we have to take this into account as we work through. And here's something that you can look at. I can't recall where I found this from, actually. I will try and remember, but number one, think of your most shaming experience from childhood. So, you know, be safe when you do this as well. You know, just be safe with yourself and think about what I'm going to say here, and don't jump into the deep end. But, you know, take a simple example maybe to begin with and just begin to work through these things. Think of one of your most shaming experiences from childhood. Now think of what you wish someone had said to you right after that experience. What would have been the most helpful and healing thing for you to hear at that time? And write this statement down on a piece of paper. And so for me, you know, I was always asked, you know, often I heard, "What's wrong with you, child?" Now, what would I have liked somebody to say to me after hearing that time and time again? I would have liked somebody to take me to one side and say to me in a very loving voice, "Penelope, I need you to know that there is nothing wrong with you, that you're a beautiful young woman and you've got the world ahead of you, and I'm going to stand by you and I'm going to help you in any way that I can to be at peace, and to know that you have the right to be your best self," and etc., etc. So that's an example. Number two, imagine that someone you care about very much, someone you admire, is saying those words to you now. So hear those words in your ears, take those words into your heart, and notice how those words make you feel. So if I had a friend of mine saying those words to me now, and you know, hearing their voice, it would feel very loving and very beautiful. So what we're doing here is re-imaging. We're changing memories. It's a very powerful tool to use. Number three, now say those words out loud to yourself. Take a deep breath and really take in those words. How does hearing yourself say those words out loud make you feel? So what you could do is imagine you're speaking to your inner child, or you've got your little you in front of you and you're saying those words. So that's work as well. But again, you could write down 10 things that bothered you from shaming experiences and reconstruct them in your thinking. And this is nice to think about, not to scare us all, but 10 years from now, make sure that you can say that you chose your life and that you didn't settle for it. So, you know, I'm choosing now over the next 10 years, I want to write, I want to write a book, I want to travel, I want to keep fit and look after my body. So then we can do little things every day that become habits and change things. We don't have to stay stuck. You know, I stopped drinking in 2012. I've had no alcohol since. I stopped smoking in 2014. We can change. You know, if I can do those things, and also my childhood trauma that I experienced, I've worked leaps and bounds. I had 2 years of trauma psychoanalysis through my doctor, and I've been working on myself. And, you know, and then we can begin to help others as well. If we want to do that, be of service. And next, here's some reflection for change. So we're looking for solutions when we want change. So what you can do is check in to see if you live in the past, the present or the future. So we bounce around as human beings, but we want to see where are we spending most of our time. And through different times of life, we're going to be spending different amounts of time in different places. But this is about honoring ourselves and figuring out who we are. And the next one is, do you feel you play small, or do you take chances in your life? So again, don't beat yourself up. This is not about beating yourself up. This is like looking at yourself, objectifying your life. The next one, are you self-disciplined enough to make progress towards your goals? And if you're not, do you need somebody to mentor you? Like I do that with people now. I'm helping people. I do astrology. I talk to people and figure these things out. And coming from having the experience of having to change myself, I understand, being stuck as well. So, get somebody to help you, a friend if need be as well. Get somebody to, the word would be, to check in with, so that you're getting feedback and saying, hey, have you done that yet? What needs to be done? And if you're stuck, why you're stuck, and in which areas of your life where do you need to overcome insecurities? So look at that. What are you insecure about? Is it money? Is it that you think you're not good enough? And begin to overcome them. And next one, have you explored the fullest potential that you are capable of being? I mean, I'm still doing that. I'm in the process of that. And we can look at that. This is a case of objectifying. Can you appreciate your unique features and regard them as beauty, all your own beauty? Yes. So I used to hate myself, or not. Well, I did. I had self-hatred, particularly when I used to drink alcohol. But now, I'm very loving to myself now. I've worked that inner critic. I have my bad days, but I don't look in the mirror and give myself that self-hatred anymore. Then can you say, I am good enough? So we want to start saying that, I am good enough. And you are. And where is the clutter in your life? Is it in your living room, in your relationship, your career, your health? And how are you going to get rid of it? How are you going to get rid of these problems? So next slide. So imagery, I suggest here on the internet, if you go to something called Unsplash, splash like water, unsplash.com, you can find beautiful free images, and you can make a collage. You could begin to lighten up your life with images. We get so stuck in not seeing beauty and if we can't get out to nature at the moment with COVID and whatever, we can begin to collect pictures and stuff and post them on our Facebook page and just create beauty around us. It's there, it's everywhere, but we need to extract it. So that's it. I'm going to leave it there, and I'll be back with more in the coming days. Thanks for listening.